You are listening to another podcast series by the Sacred Art of Living community, honoring soul-sized questions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daryl Williams, your host for this podcast series called Soul-Sized Questions. Spiritual director Jack Kennedy explores how spiritual direction can be a powerful way to bring healing to our wider world. Whether or not the listener intends to be involved in the formal work of spiritual direction, Jack's lifetime of experience invites us all to reimagine ways of supporting the spiritual journey, regardless of our path or tradition.
This is just a free association, but I'm going to share it with you because one of the gifts that, or one of the abilities that is part of being a spiritual director is being able to make prayer suggestions, reflection suggestions for people who you sit with who are bringing to you what's going on in their lives, and maybe a traditional form of prayer doesn't work, and you're listening to what's going on and can allow yourself to creatively make suggestions to them. And something came to my experience in what Mary was just leading us through, because in my up here holding this energy and the color of it, it became the world. It was the globe. And I was aware of past prayer suggestions made to me and made to other people that I'm just going to say, tuck it away somewhere, because it's very helpful, is in terms of what we feel toward what's going on in our world or on the globe, is actually taking a globe of the world and just holding it during prayer time and letting your hands go where your hands want to go and letting your hands hold or massage or put warmth on it. Because my own awareness of myself is some of my rage and anger about what I see going on. And what I experience in my life, whether it's healthy or not, in terms of what I see the corporate world, I don't just mean global corporations, but any corporate entity that's not healthy, what it does to people's spirits, I sometimes want to lay my hands on that. For example, if I lay my hands on Washington, D.C., does something transform in terms of the anger I feel inside or the rage? One of the obstacles last night that was in my lotus, or what I was holding, was a volcano. And it's like, well, anyway, it's a way of praying that's real for me. And sometimes I suggest that to people. Or instead of just reading your newspaper, don't even read it. Just hold it in your lap and put your hands on the paper. And let energy, healing energy, go there with the news. It may sound... It doesn't fit linearly. It doesn't fit with something you're going to find as a traditional prayer experience. Does it allow you some way to connect with the sacred within you and the sacred to be present to the world or your world? It can be brought down even more individually to a person, a picture, an item, whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to share that because it came up with me, in me. I want to ask a question of the group, and I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you fit into the category I'm going to suggest. I just want to know, both possibly for today and certainly for next semester, who among you are people who have had some form of training in the area of listening, the art of listening, whether it's CPE, therapy, any form of the psychological arts. I could name a lot of areas. If you have had some experience in that and some training in that, would you just raise your hands and leave them up? I'd like to get it. Well, I don't even need to count. There's more than you need to know. That's good. That's helpful to me. Thank you. I'd like to spend some time giving you a little bit more input today to focus us for some quiet time and for some work in some triads together. So let me just share that with you briefly. I've got about a half hour here to ask you to consider and hold something in your life Part of this is about, at this point in the course, starting to be able to be with, to hold, and to name what the meaning of this class is for you. What the invitation is, if there is any invitation at all. I kind of hate to ask the question this way. It's a very Western question. What do you want to do with this? I don't mean to imply that you need to do anything, but is there anything rising up in you when you hold your own experience around this? And one of the reasons we invite you into prayer experiences, quiet time, reflection, and reflecting in these courses is because at least if you feel called or invited into what I call the ministry of spiritual direction in any of its formal ways or partially formal ways, it really is going to flow out of your own spirituality in some way, your own link with the infinite, as Jung mentioned, as Richard used last night. And so it's really my own, whatever my abilities are, to be with somebody else on their journey in terms of exploring their link to the infinite, their experience of the sacred, is probably a no-brainer to most of you, but I want to re-stress it. It really results from our own noticing how God uniquely is active or co-labors or is hoping or is compassionate or is desiring in me in some way. So a lot of inviting you into your own experience of the sacred is for you, no matter what you decide to do with it, in quotes. But it also is for, in my mind, if I don't lay a trip on anybody else, it is for the sake of the people of the world, however you experience interacting with the people of the world in some way. Ronald Rolheiser, maybe some of you have read his book, The Holy Longing, uses a language about discovering in ourselves, not creating it, but discovering it's there, a restlessness, a longing, a hunger. In fact, all the supervision groups I've met with this weekend have brought up the sense of hunger out there in the world, awareness of hunger that people themselves are not even in touch with. There's another word that maybe hunger doesn't fit their experience, but something's going on there. That's why I think that question, did you eat well, is an important question. I think it's important in the state of Oregon because we're the hungriest state in this nation, but I think it goes fuller, broader, deeper in terms of all of our hungers for what we need and want in order to feel alive and thrive in some way. So Rolheiser is saying that hunger is in us if we take the time, my language coming out of this weekend, if we take the time for creative non-action, for wu wei, which I'm going to invite you into this morning. I find that concept, that way of being, very compatible with the spirituality, at least that I grow up in the Christian tradition and in the Ignatian tradition. For him, spirituality, and what I want you to more intentionally focus on today, tomorrow, over the interim till next February, and we're going to do a lot more around this more intentionally, is getting in touch with that hunger, that longing, that desire, that hoping. Spirituality from our side is what we're going to do with that, how we want to channel it, how we want to confirm already how we hold it and channel it and make use of it in some way in our life. So I'm asking you to be more intentional around that and focusing on what the meaning of this course is. And tomorrow Richard will be giving you a handout and asking you to actually mail it back in, which is, especially if you're thinking about pursuing becoming spiritual director in a more formal sense and wanting to be part of the internship program that we're offering, that you would declare that intent. So I'm inviting you more and more to be with your experience to see what's coming up in you as you take this class. Also, I'd like to refer you, if you don't get Presence Magazine, which is put out by Spiritual Directors International, there's an article in this last issue that's quite good on the spirituality for a spiritual director. And some of the stuff I'm sharing with you comes out of that. It kind of names for me what I'm called, the way I'm called to walk in order to be with other people in the world in some way. So first of all, I want to reinforce some basic distinctions so that you can start to pay attention to what you're called to and invited to. This may be incredibly clear to you already, because we may have stressed it clearly. I still want to stress it. And as I lay these out, they're rather simplistic. You could tweak these or even re-stress them and develop them more fully, but they make some basic distinctions that bleed into each other and integrate in a lot of ways, but they kind of give a sense of what we are first of all about or are not about in terms of spiritual direction. So, the person I drew this from made these basic distinctions. If you're interested in learning about the beliefs, observances, and text of a religion because you want to know more or seek to more fully identify with that faith community, you are seeking religious education or formation. And it's good to know that inside yourself when somebody comes for an initial interview to get a sense of what it is they're seeking in some way. I sometimes get calls and people ask to meet with me, and when I find out what they're looking for, I need to clarify with them whether I can help them in that area or not, or support them. It may not be at all what they thought spiritual direction was about in some way. In a sense, we're doing some of this in this course by taking all the different religious traditions. We may want to know more. We may want to identify more with it and live it out more fully. We want to maybe want to know how to be with somebody who comes out of that tradition. If you want to relieve your anxieties, now this is overly simplistic, but it gets at, I think, a basic distinction, and learn how to understand and deal with their causes, you are seeking some form of psychotherapy, something therapeutic. Does that bleed over? Is that a part of spiritual direction? I really believe it is, in a lot of ways. But it's not the initial focus of it. If you want insight into how the wisdom of a religious tradition might help you understand and respond to your problems, you are seeking pastoral counseling. I certainly experienced this a lot as priest. Especially in the Roman tradition, people bringing me marriage issues. A big one that was a strong struggle for a lot of years, although a lot of people could just not even be impacted, it was the issue of birth control that came up in the Roman church. And very loving, committed couples really struggling painfully with what am I called to do and where is God in the midst of this. That became an issue, a problem that came up in their relational life. Life and death issues. My fiancée, Jean, her older sister, who was 1 year older, just 51, since I was last here, suddenly went into a coma from incredible bleeding on the brain. And we were together in processing how to be there with her and the family and all the ethical issues that came up around as Anne went into coma and they did the blood test. It was an aggressive form of leukemia that had shown up in 2 weeks, and there was incredible bleeding on the brain, and that caused coma and stroke. And so all I'm saying is there was a lot of both just as family being there and also the support of all of us who were trying to hold them as they made decisions, a lot of pastoral counseling in a sense of the grieving and being there for Anne and honoring what were the loving decisions to make. Anne died, and the family, the children, which was hard, they're in their 20s, finally made the decision they needed to remove the life support systems. So that's sort of what's freshest in my life as I come here. And it's also another way of really being present to somebody spiritually. I'm sorry about that, but I carry a lot of that yet. Another area of pastoral counseling that ends up being an issue that's sometimes acute, you deal with it now, and it may not be ongoing like spiritual direction, is the whole area of forgiveness and reconciliation. I think forgiveness is an incredible psychological issue. And I assume therapists deal with the ability to forgive and what reconciliation means and doesn't mean, just in terms of even forgiving myself. letting go of all those judgments and all that negative stuff that doesn't allow us to come into our fullness. That's also a piece of pastoral counseling and very much a piece of spiritual direction. But spiritual direction is, if you wish to deepen your relationship with God so that you can recognize how God's Spirit might be calling you and moving you in your life, you are seeking spiritual guidance. And I just want to reinforce that that is what it's first of all about. And when you're with someone, it is about that, whether they resolve all their anxieties or not, whether they resolve their forgiveness or reconciliation issues. If there is a sense they are already in relationship with God, and that's my belief that I come out of, my language is we're stuck with it. We are loved and held by the sacred. And so if I know that about somebody, even if they don't know that, can I help them hold that and discover and be with that in some way and give them lots of room and time? That's why spiritual direction is much more ongoing than pastoral counseling, for example. If I'm not dealing with an issue, I'm helping someone continue to sustain or grow in relationship. I'm not going to spend time on, I was going to spend a lot of time this morning, but I don't have it, on the difference between spiritual sustainability and spiritual growth. I've talked about it before, but always very briefly. I'm going to hold that over until next semester in some way. These are actually some quotes that I took from that article in Presence Magazine, because it really reinforced in what I wanted you to be aware of this morning. Spirituality is the way we experience God or the sacred, and I want you to put your language, your symbols in there, so I don't impose my symbol for the sacred on you, and the way we shape our lives in response to that experience. The way we experience God, we depend on our image of God, our religious tradition, you know all this. Our response to that experience will be expressed in images, beliefs, attitudes of heart, and certain practices that we find fruitful ways to express and foster that relationship. What I call you to and invite you to is to be very sensitive to what your symbols and images are, not what you think they should be. And in that acceptance and sensitivity, to be able to hold a space for other people to do that. That may be clear as a bell to you intellectually. Practicing that, which I'm going to invite you into this morning, is something I want you to continue to practice as a basic way of letting people have their experience. Maybe all you do is what came up last month again, letting people have their experience and showing up for it at the same time, because you actually showed up to their experience in a way that they haven't been able to, and that allows the freedom and the safety for that to happen. Spiritual direction is that form of pastoral care which aims at helping another person to become more aware of God's personal communication to him or her, to respond personally to God, and to live the consequences of that relationship. Now again, that's in the Western Christian tradition. There are a lot of traditions that don't see it as personal. There's another way of relating to that. It may be holding the innate compassion in some way. But what I want to point to again, it's about helping somebody discover what's already there. It's about not making it happen. It's not about making it happen. It's about being aware of what is happening. And that's what I'm going to invite you into in your prayer experience this morning, is just being with what is happening. One of the reasons I'm stressing this, and I may not need to stress it, but when I listen to people individually, when I hear what comes up sometimes in the large group, and I'm this way too, we're all so conditioned to what to do about it, how to fix it. Did you do this? Did you do that? And that's an important piece of spiritual direction. But I very often catch myself stepping right into that before just allowing somebody to hold it and discover what's already sacred in it anyway. It's really important. There was no way for us to fix Anne. I learned a lot about spiritual direction in Anne's sickness and death. We were there on her and God's terms, and we had to continually let go of our hoping for an outcome to be present to whatever it was, because it's not about the outcome here, it's about Anne. And I don't want to equate sitting in spiritual direction with somebody this is terminal, but it's about life. And it's about how do we continually do that work of letting go to be with. and still bringing to it what we want to mirror in some way. I'm still processing that. As spiritual directors, we come to direction with the belief that the desire for God is already planted in the hearts of those we direct, and that our role as directors is to help people get in touch with and claim and live out of their deepest desires. The reason I'm stressing this again is it's coming up in the supervision groups. I think you know, all of you who are using directors from our internship program are in supervision. And we meet in small groups, 3 to 6 people. And sometimes the supervisory issues that come up for any of us, that come up for me in supervision, is how come you're not doing that practice you said you were going to do last time? And how come the very things you desire for yourself you haven't lived out yet? And I'm in there trying to fix that, and sometimes judging it or letting it distance me from somebody. And I can keep supporting and honoring, but I let my own judgmentalness become an obstacle of being present to somebody really struggling to discover the same things we struggle to discover and be with and hold without being judgmental. So it is an invitation. Continually, I will call you to this, even if it's so basic you got it down. I want to make sure you got it down, of being able to be with your own experience enough that you create that breathing space for people to do whatever it is they need to do. That doesn't mean you don't challenge. That doesn't mean you don't ask the kind of questions that ask people to go into their experience, and we're going to practice that again this morning. But it's being able to not let anything that's an obstacle, what you want the outcome to be, get in the way of being present relationally. I know for me in my own prayer life, my own desires for what I want the outcome of my spiritual life to be gets in the way of me being in my relationship with God. And God may have no need for me to finally work this through. I don't know. Sometimes God's saying, Jack, would you just rest? Give it a break. Give it a break.
Spiritual Director Jack Kennedy explores how spiritual direction can be a powerful way to bring healing to our wider world. Whether or not the listener intends to be involved in the formal work of spiritual direction, Jack's lifetime of experience invites us all to reimagine ways of supporting the spiritual journey regardless of our path or tradition.